Welcome back to Rugby Rundown, our weekly news program with Jan de Koning, renowned rugby journalist, the man that sits in on all the press conferences, all the behind the scenes things. One of them was the press conference last week where SA Rugby said they're reviewing all competitions, and the emphasis is on all competitions. You were there. Some outlets reported something different to what you heard. Let's talk to me about that.
MV, yes, thank you for having me again. It's always such a pleasure chatting to you. Just context, I mean, the question was asked, and the specific question was asked, does this include the EPCR competitions? So, there was a loaded question with an agenda, but that's fine. I mean, that's every journalist right. They might have heard a rumor. And then Mark distinctly said, all our competitions. In July, they'll have a meeting where they're going to look at all their competitions. But this has to be seen in a broader picture of... made it clear. They want to see a global calendar. They want to move into a global calendar. So they have a space, because at the moment, South Africa's players don't have a break. They don't have a rest period, because if once the Springboks play right through from July with bits and pieces here and there, but they play from July right until November. And then in December, there's European stuff. So, until December, the franchises don't have their Springboks. Now they need to use their Springboks, and then they've got to rest them in February and March a little bit, and it's a right royal mess. So the only way to solve this is for Africa to move in line with the Northern Hemisphere schedule. I know it sounds silly, but we need to move there. Play our rugby championship or whatever in February, March, and then our players can rest in October, August, September. So you give them too much. August, when you're done with the July test, those players, just like the English players, will then have a 2-month break. The franchises can have proper pre-seasons. That's the advantage. Proper pre-seasons. You have a break for 2 months, you get into a pre-season, and then September, October, November, then you can start with your games. And I think that's the context that Mark said.
Okay, so what does that mean? Like you just mentioned, the July test will still remain on the calendar. We're all speculating now. And then the November ones will also stay on the calendar, obviously because of the Nations Championship, I suppose. So it basically just opens up the August-September window. And like you said, Jan Ackerman has also said many times with Super Rugby, it was such a clear schedule. You played and you stopped and you had a bit of a rest and you came back in the new season. So clear and well-defined. The problem that we have is that we saddled with this problem now, with our players effectively playing a 12-month schedule or calendar, and it's not our own making. We were kicked out of Super Rugby, if I'm not mistaken, and we were forced to go look for different competitions to play in, and now we're paying the price for New Zealand not being willing to change the calendar. New Zealand and Australia, why would they not want to change the calendar? I mean, it's such an obvious thing. It's a no-brainer. What's the problem?
Because they don't have competition December and January. So remember, they don't play Super Rugby until March, April. That's when their season starts. So they have that period that they always had in Super Rugby. So they have the Super Rugby season runs until about June. Then they got the July internationals. Then they've got a bit of a break in the rugby champs. I think it's about like a 3-week or a 4-week break, not even that long. Then the rugby champs, and then November, and then they've got a 2-month break. So they're the stickers. And let's not beat around the bush. The problem here is New Zealand and Australia, the kissing cousins of the South Pacific. Seriously. And when people say we got kicked out of Super Rugby, it was literally during COVID. New Zealand and Australia decided they no longer need South Africa. They've got this wonderful idea, this wonderful competition. They're going to play amongst themselves. And they decided... And what they did is, but they knew for a long time that South Africa was looking north. So we weren't angels either. We were looking north, and we were talking. It was a definite conversation that was being had. They said to us, "We no longer need you." So Africa said, "Well, thank you. Now we just move quicker." So did they kick us out? Yes. Were we going to move? Yes. That whole process just moved forward. So we went north very much quicker than we originally anticipated. We were waiting for a proper break in the broadcast schedule and that sort of stuff. Also, so all those technical things. And COVID came, and New Zealand threw their toys. So they thought they were clever. And now everybody in New Zealand says, listen, this is not working for us. We want South Africa back, but I don't think we'll ever go back because we're very happy where we are at the moment. More money, and you can see at the New Zealand stadiums, except for 1 or 2 games, 15,000 seater, they'll have a sellout in Christchurch, or they might have a few people in Auckland. Wellington struggles to get 15,000. Hamilton it doesn't even sell out, and they have 15,000 seater stadium. So they've got problems, and I think the same applies to Otago or the Highlanders. And you can look at the Australian games. They can spin it as they want, but their crowds are up and their TV audiences up. They are up, but they're still below what the URC is doing. They are way below what the URC is doing. So why would we go to an inferior product for less money? We had to share, because everybody now sees in the URC the draw card South African teams. There's more money, more TV money. There's all sorts of things that benefits the URC. So why would you go back and go share all your value with New Zealand and Australia? And at one stage, we were propping up Japan as well, the Sunwolves. That entire mess when we had the 18-team conference system that was an entire unworkable mess, something I never got a liking to. So I can't see us want to go back to that sort of mess where New Zealand and Australia always looking for, because they're competing with so many other sports. Rugby union in Australia if they're in the top 5, they're lucky. I think they're outside the top 5. I mean soccer and Tennecoit would even be better than rugby union, more attractive than rugby union in Australia.
Yeah.
So I can't see us going back there.
No, I don't think we're going back there. I think we're going away from SANZAAR altogether, it looks like. I mean, that includes maybe dumping the Rugby Championship if they don't play along. I've got a feeling that we're calling their bluff a little bit and it's going to see who blinks first. Okay, so New Zealand doesn't want to move to that Six Nations window because that overlaps with Super Rugby. Super Rugby is like a provincial tournament. Just move it out a month or 2 and then take your break the same time as everybody else, August, September, maybe.
Yeah.
The point is, what are you going to do if you don't have a Rugby Championship anymore and those Springboks don't play in the Rugby Championship anymore? You're going to bring Japan in. I think those Springboks are in a very, very good position. We saw their financials just announced last week as well, how healthy they are financially compared to what New Zealand and Australia are, for example. I think South Africa's got maybe a bit of the upper hand here, but are they going a bit too far, do you think, of calling this bluff? Let's talk about the SANZAAR relationship specifically, and we'll talk about alternatives about Europe just now. But, can they afford to really walk away from the Rugby Championship? That is the biggest thing. The greatest rivalry tour is now built around it. Can we really, disturb the relationship with New Zealand specifically?
The greatest rivalry tour is the perfect window for us to, I know it's only every second year at this stage.
4th year.
But we've got that, and we can tour Australia if we want to. We can bring Australia in. So that will be ongoing. It's just not going to be the Rugby Championship, So there's different ways of getting around that. I think you read before we came on air. You read me a little line and
I'll read it to you again.
Statement from Sari.
Yeah.
If you just want to read that line for me again, I want to explain something about that line.
This is the important thing that you mentioned, because SA Rugby felt it necessary to send out another email or press release after those articles started appearing and the speculation started soaring and lots of people started whispering about things. They said the following, and I'm just quoting one line from it. A couple of lines. SA Rugby planned some time ago to host a strategic planning session of its members and the directors of rugby to undertake a thorough review of competitions and focus on identifying a workable solution to the pressing issue of player welfare of South Africa's players. This will take place before the end of July. It is in response to the need to find a competition schedule that does not compromise the health of players or the performances of teams, and this is now the key words, in the absence of progress to align to a global schedule, a global calendar. There we go.
That's what I wanted to say to you. That's where I started off, and we should have read this first. But a lot to a global schedule. Sari wants to move north. We've moved north with our franchises. We want to move north with not necessarily just play in the Northern Hemisphere. But I think you're right when you say they're calling New Zealand's bluff. Says if you don't, then we're just going to rethink the rugby champs. What do we get out of the rugby champs? You still got lots of travel. So Mark Alexander mentioned about traveling. To travel in November, they got to book 6 months in advance. Traveling to Australia is even worse. Australia and New Zealand. And unless we turn that rugby champs into a condensed 4-week or a 3-week schedule where everybody plays everybody every Saturday for 3 quick weeks and the tournament's over, I don't think it's going to work. So I think, are they calling SANZAAR's bluff? Maybe yes. but there's more value for South Africa to seek alternative competitions. I mean, we can go play all sorts of teams in international teams. We can play Argentina in February. There's ways for us to stay active, and our players will still play in the Northern Hemisphere. So I think that one little line to be aligned with the global calendar. Everybody wants to move to a different calendar, which aligns with the Northern Hemisphere. That's where the money is. France, England, Europe, maybe America, North America. That's where the money is. If you're struggling financially, as New Zealand is, because they used up their equity deal completely, they had to take another loan from them, and they're going to be paying back in perpetuity, paying that loan back that they took from that American company. So Silver Lake deal, there's nothing silver about that lake. It's very dark, deep, dark hole where New Zealand's money is. And that's why I see somebody mentioned this morning about the ASG. What happened to ASG? The best move the franchises could have made is to prevent that from going ahead, because we would have been in the same situation as New Zealand. These guys owning all our rights, and then we sitting there now, Mark Alexander and Rian Oberholz, and them, they can sell their rights, the image rights and all their rights on the open market, and they get all the money. So the broadcast deal, we already know that SuperSport and Canal Plus has come to an agreement. So SARU's broadcast rights are signed in or sealed in, locked in for the next 5 years. So that sort of financial stability is what New Zealand and Australia doesn't have at the moment, because their broadcast in Australia, they don't hardly get any TV money. They will tell you how much money they get, but it's not comparable to what South Africa gets in terms of value and what they get out of it. So I think they're definitely making a mistake by not moving. It's going to cost them more than it's going to cost anybody else.
Yeah, just before I move on, interesting enough, for the first time this year or last year, the revenues from non-broadcasting surpassed that of broadcasting for SA Rugby. The commercial deals and sponsorships and stuff surpassed the TV rights. That's interesting. I just wanted to ask you another question. When we were younger, there was a saying that said, if you play hard to get, you get nothing. So if South Africa now calls their bluff and we're out of the Rugby Championship, I mean, really, Argentina in February, is that really going to have the same kind of a pool that an All Blacks test might have? So the obvious, more obvious, I suppose, better solution, but I think we're not going to be welcome at all, is maybe to join the Six Nations as a seventh nation. But I mean, the Europeans don't even like us playing in the European Cup. How are they going to ever welcome us into the Six Nations? I mean, you know where I'm going. So if you play, you're bluffing a little bit, and then they call your bluff. What now? We might be caught short here.
Or they might also be caught short. Just remember, if we move, the attraction that the Rugby Champs has is South Africa. You got the World Champions, suddenly they're gone. So now, what have you got? What are you left with? The Bledisloe Cup. Maybe Argentina feels like traveling to New Zealand, Australia all the time for a bit of test rugby, or they can come and play with South Africa. We can get a Japan. We saw how much the Japan game. You play a couple of games at Twickenham on the weekends that there's no Rugby Champs or Six Nations games at Twickenham. You can play some very interesting teams. You can do double headers at Twickenham. There's lots of things you can do to keep the Springboks active. Yes, we don't have New Zealand and Australia, but there's other ways of getting that. So, it is going to be interesting. But I think, as Mark Alexander said, I think there's some tough decisions to be made, and those tough decisions will be made, because it's important that we. And he said it repeatedly. He said, you can't keep going back to the boardroom with the same starting point. So at some stage, we need to start moving forward. We finished, and then next time we meet, we've got we're starting the same point. Okay, let's start a blank sheet. Let's start there's that old saying, if you do the same thing over and over and expect different results, it's an example of idiocy.
Well, the other side of that coin is that got a lot of people hot under the collar was the fact that we might withdraw from the European Cup competitions, the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup. And SA Rugby was, I think, very quick to move and to quell that speculation, specifically with that press release. And Marco Mazzotti also made it very clear that if South Africa withdraws from those competitions, he's going to stop writing the checks. He's not going to fund it. And I know there was a bit of, that might have been a bit speculative. Do you think there's any truth to the rumor that we might be moving? What would the idea be? I mean, to play against Toulouse, Edgar Happen said to me that a sold-out Loftus against the Stormers makes less money than a round of 16 match for the Bulls against Toulouse, for example. Why would you want to withdraw from that competition?
I agree with you. That's a very speculative narrative, and I understand, and I'm going to say it again. The question was asked: does these include, and it is a loaded question, does this include the EPCR tournaments? It's a valid question, but it's a loaded question. And Mark Alexander's answer was, we will look at all our competitions. So, and going back to that line, if we want to align with a global competition, with a global calendar, then we don't move out of Europe, because the only place where we're not in line with the global calendar is in Sanzar, is in the rugby champs. The rest of our competitions are all aligned with the global calendar already. So I think that maybe missed the boat, or maybe it was an agenda and somebody wanted that answer and they didn't get the answer. So I don't foresee us leaving Europe because there's too much money. We just became full partners. Why on earth? You just have to use a bit of logic. We just became full partners of EPCR and URC. So why would you give that up when you already get more? And where are you going to go back? So we'll give all that we get up in Europe and the money and the TV value that you get to go back to Southern Hemisphere Super Rugby, which is now so diluted and it's got no value. And we have to build it up again to what it was. So now I can't foresee that happening.
Yeah, and the teams are falling by the wayside. I mean, Manu Samoa's out, and it's probably a matter of time before the others start failing as well. Let us move on. I talked about Marco Mazzotti, the Sharks. Lots of movement at the Sharks. Lots of new signings and a couple of surprise departures. And Marvin Orie was at the Bulls last time, and then I know he went to the Stormers after the Sharks. I'd never heard from him again. Now he's out the door again. Talk to me about the departures firstly.
Let's start with Grims, Leroux Malan, Siya Kolisi, Jean Smith. They're all moving. That's all known. Marvin Orie for me is an interesting one because he hasn't got a club signed yet. Nobody has said yet where he's going, and that thing didn't say where he's. So I think Marvin Orie is the interesting one for me. Definitely. I mean, see how we know is coming to the Stormers. Grant is going to Japan. Leroux Malan is going to Cardiff. John Smith is going to Benetton.
John Smith, Franco Smith's son. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I can't remember if he was actually born in
Italy.
Wasn't one of his sons born in Italy?
I think it was Franco. John was born in Italy, yes, because he's going back to Benetton as well. Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah. So and then but yeah. So Marvin Orie, I mean. The guy's a bit long in the tooth. He's a great servant of the game. He was a good lock at his time. He was a Springbok, and he added a lot of value, especially in 2019 World Cup. His work, the work that he done, and I'll never forget how Rassie and them spoke about the work that he did in the build-up to test as the opposing. He reads the opposition so much, so he knows what's going to happen. The opposition is going to do. It's a bit like Victor Matfield, also brilliant at reading lineouts, reading opposition lineouts and studying lineouts. And that was Marvin Orie's real value, the lineouts. Maybe he wasn't the most physical, but he was still a very good and a valuable player. But I think maybe it's time for him. Maybe he's planning to hang up his boots. But I'm just speculating. But I mean, I can't see who will take him back. The Bulls has no need for Marvin Orie again, unless they're desperate for a third line lock. Just in case, or a Currie Cup lock. Isn't that what he did last time in any event? He was just a Currie Cup lock. So I don't think the Stormers is in need for Marvin Orie. So, I mean, he comes from here. He was at Tygerberg at school with Eben. So, maybe he's coming back to Cape Town and maybe play some Currie Cup rugby for them. But there's no indication of where he's going. And I don't think he's going to go back overseas. So... but MV, what I want to say is, I mean, if you look at all those departures, then you got to look at the signings. That in itself is significant. Even Van Sail is scrum off, so that's replacing Grant. Thomas du Toit, it's no wonder the other props are going because they know they're not going to get game time. Thomas can play both sides, and now he's starting to throw in the lineouts. At Bath, you can and all three front row positions. He could be the Malcolm Marx because he's a good carrier. He's a very mobile player. Maybe not as mobile as Malcolm Marx, but he can do that. The interesting for me is Stefan Levis. the lock. That's probably why Marvin is moving on. And then Gianni Lombard, that one puzzles me a little bit because Gianni Lombard's been injured all the time. He was so injured at the Stormers, then he eventually left and he joined the Lions, and he's constantly injured here as well. He's not a bad player, he's a talented player, but he's just never lived up to his promise that he showed as a youngster. So it puzzles me a bit, but maybe, who knows, sometimes a player needs to move to another union, change of scenery, and then it becomes good. And then Cameron Dawson, prop, that's also, but Cameron Dawson's a good prop, very, very seasoned prop. So I think that explains why that other prop is, he knows, he's a talented young prop, that one that's coming to the Bulls. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, that's interesting. Gianni Lombard's one of those, the Lions that seems to have a detrimental effect on fly-off careers.
Except for Chris Smith.
Yeah, but he went the other way. That's interesting enough. Yeah, I'm excited about the Sharks. I think they had the second worst URC season ever. I mean, they had, change of coaches midway, and it looked a bit better for a while, but it seemed to slip down. But it seems like they now have changed their approach, not having all these Springboks in the books anymore. Eben Etzebeth hasn't played, how much time has he played? Apart from his ban, he's been injured, and I think they've seen the light there. So let's hope a better season next year. They're out of the Champions Cup, which is bad. Lions are in the Champions Cup, which is a good thing. But I mean, it's going to have huge implications for them. Especially Marcus said he's not going to write checks anymore. And now you're playing in the junior competition. No, that's not on. Let's just talk about the Asenati Hlabakanye ban. I mean, you and I talked about it a little while ago. I don't know. This was a shock to me. I didn't expect this. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I've been trying to get the reasoning behind this, because a lot of the information I had was that it was all the fault of the doctor that prescribed this stuff to him, But that doctor he was sent to that doctor by the Lions team doctor. And when he came back to the Lions team doctor, he asked the Lions team doctor again, can I take this? This is prescribed. Can I take this stuff? The Lions team doctor said, oh, well, if he prescribed it, you can take it. But he asked, So exactly what happened in that meeting, what's the reasoning behind that? It's very weird. So I think for me, I am also puzzled. So the starter is, from the information I have at hand, I'm also puzzled that it's so long, and that he actually was banned for starters, and why it's so long. So once the full explanation comes out, that will be worth investigating and seeing exactly what the reason is behind, because they will give an explanation to exactly why. So the full written report usually comes out a week or so after, so it's due any day now. So I'll keep chasing that, and yeah, let's see what happens.
I want to ask you a question. I heard a little birdie saying that the doctor on the morning of the trial decided not to testify, and that put a big spanner in the works. Did you hear anything about that?
I heard rumors that there's issues with the doctor, that he wasn't going to testify, and then he was going to testify and then didn't testify. If that's true, yeah, then there's a problem, because then what Hlabakanye said, the doctor said, I can do this, and the doctor doesn't confirm that. That throws Hlabakanye under the bus. And it might be that doctor, as far as I know, that doctor's left the Lions in any event. So, yeah, that may be true. That may be why, because then Hlabakanye didn't have proof of what he was saying. Then it's his word against but it's, you just got to ask yourself, he wasn't found guilty because the stuff was in his system. He was found guilty because he declared it. He said to them, I took this medication. That medication included this. And, suddenly they said, hold on a second, So he was found guilty, not because he proved it. So the stuff they found in his system was non-performance. So it's not illegal. So they never did anything about that. Even though they charged him with it, it was non-performance. Then they charged him with the second one, which he declared. It wasn't found in his system. It was out of his system already. He just said, I took this medication. Honest guy, he thought he was in it clear, because, he did speak to the doctor. So there's something very strange about this. I want to take you back to the original statement that Sarah sent out. When they said he withdrew from the Springbok team, they put out a statement, and they made it pretty clear that he took medication prescribed by a physician that was appointed to look after the welfare of the players. Okay, so that was Saru's statement. So they made it pretty clear that he took the medication because it was prescribed by a physician that was appointed to look after the welfare of the players. And that's the crux of the matter for me. That's the thing that puzzles me, is why is nothing done about this doctor? Maybe something is still going to do. Maybe the doctor knew, and that's why he didn't testify. If he didn't testify, we're again speculating, because I don't have, until we get the full written statement, we will know if he testified or not. So until we get that full written statement, we won't know. But if there was something that doctor, sorry, I can incriminate myself, and then decide, hold on a second, maybe some clever lawyer said to him, listen, you better watch it, because if you say anything about this, the medical council can come after you.
And do you know if they're going to appeal it? I mean, this is a huge setback for him. 18 months, going to miss the World Cup. He has to forfeit all his match fees that he's earned since the day that his suspension was allowed, or the fact that he was going to be investigated. I mean, it's going to have a massive impact on him.
For him to stay active when he can't play rugby, that's going to take a lot of discipline. The 3-week period, I asked about appeals, and on 3 occasions now I was told we can't say yay or nay until the appeal period is surpassed. It's a 3-week. He's got 3 weeks to, and I think it's this coming Friday, if I'm correct. The 3-week is up. So sometime this week he needs to say yay or nay whether he's going to appeal. So that's something that we got to, maybe next week we've got an answer for you if he's going to appeal or not.
I'm just thinking, if I go rob a bank, for argument's sake, and nobody knew that I robbed the bank, but then I put out a statement and say, listen, sorry, I robbed the bank. Isn't that more or less what happened here?
Mate, and he tells the cops, yeah.
Sorry, say again?
So you tell your best mate and he goes and tells the cops.
No, even I go to the police station and say, listen, I didn't mean to, but I robbed the bank, Or I thought I was withdrawing money from the ATM, but it ended up that I actually robbed the bank or something like that. The point is, the fact that he admitted to something that was actually against the rules doesn't excuse the fact that he broke the rules. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So his argument was always that he asked if there's anything in the system that he's not supposed to take. So he took the prescription back to the team doctor, and the team doctor cleared it and told him to take it. If that guy prescribed it, take it. I would have said the team doctor had to check what's in there in that prescription, because the other physician was not necessarily familiar with sporting codes and sporting drug regulations. So it is a very curious case, and I've been following it all along, and I've asked a lot of questions, and it is a very curious case. The whole thing centers around what exactly did the doctor say to Tlabakanye, and what did Tlabakanye and the doctor, if the doctor didn't testify, obviously, but what did Tlabakanye say in a hearing? So all that stuff, when we get the full written report, that's going to make for another very interesting story, because that will reveal a lot to us as to how this all transpired.
No, yeah, the question I'm asking is because next time what's going to happen, somebody takes a forbidden thing that's definitely against the rules, and all he says is, no, the doctor told me I could take it. The fact of the matter is the rules are the rules. So I suppose that's what's behind it. Anyway, let's move on. Just lastly, the World Cup. Our esteemed Minister of Sport has now decided we must host the World Cup. Mark Alexander sort of scoffed at it. There doesn't seem to be too much love lost between those two. But what's going on there?
Yeah, look, this. I think Mark Alexander's words were saying more, and a lot of times he used wording, and they getting very clever with that, using wording by telling you what's actually going on, but you have to read between the lines. So he said the minister. So this was Mark's words. He is the minister. He can say what he likes. I don't have to agree with that. That's what he didn't say. So he's the minister. He can say what he likes. I don't have to agree with that. He says, and then him and Rian went on to explain exactly why South Africa can't afford to host the World Cup. You have to put up 700. Well, by the time the America 2031 comes around, American World Cup comes around, the expected profit you must guarantee World Rugby a profit of 100 million or $1 billion dollars. Now we're talking US dollars. You're not talking rands. So you go times that by 16 or 17, whatever the rand exchange rate is. So you're talking about 16 or 17 billion rand guarantee. So did Gayton McKenzie ever sit back for a second and think what he was saying? Or was he just a typical politician that just flapped his mouth, flapped his lips? And that's my feeling. Is he was saying the thing to win some political brownie points, and created a big storm. So we are definitely going to hold the World Cup. No, you're not going to, because World Rugby won't afford it to you, won't award it to you, because you can't make any money here. So Rian pointed out that by the time the 2035 tournament comes around, that guarantee is probably going to sit at 1.3 billion. Again, times it by 16 or 17. The rand might be back to 20 by then. So ask yourself, where are we going to get all those 20? Where are we going to get 20 billion from to guarantee World Rugby a profit? 20 billion rand. So he wants to get 200 million here, 200 million there. He's not even going to get close to it. Who's going to put up? Let's say, for argument's sake, the guarantee, the initial guarantee is about 10 billion rand, minimum of 10 billion rand for World Rugby to even look at us. Who's going to put up that money? No sponsors. South Africa doesn't have sponsors big enough. You'll have to go into the international, and you can't take. You must remember, you can't take sponsors, because World Rugby's got all the sponsors for that tournament. You got to give them clean stadiums. That's the big thing. That's always, people fight with me about this. Oh, this is called DHL Stadium, or it's called Vodacom Stadium, or it's called Emirates Airlines Park, and all that rubbish. It's called Ellis Park, Cape Town Stadium, Loftus Versfeld. Because if you host a World Cup, what is that name? That's a name that you have to. So you got to offer them clean stadiums without sponsors. You got to have a clean stadium without any perimeter sponsors, and a certain distance from the stadium. You can't say in the streets and put up all sponsors. You got to, when they say clean stadium, they mean clean stadium, because they put up all their promotions and their sponsors there, because that's where they make their money. So they take all the commercial value out of the tournament. That's why you got to afford. So now you're going to. So think about this, and this is what I asked. So you have to upgrade all our stadiums. None of our stadiums are. Even the Cape Town Stadium is not up to standard at the moment for a World Cup. So now you're going to go upgrade all our stadiums. So about 6 or 8 stadiums that you're going to upgrade for the tournament. That's going to cost you billions. The infrastructure, you need to make sure there's enough hotels in the area. If you're going to play a game in Nelspruit, can you host 10,000 people in Nelspruit? So it's all that infrastructure, transport, public transport. We don't have public transport to speak of. People just don't think logically about this. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the money to build the infrastructure. Our economy is down the toilet. And so I think Mark Alexander and Rian said, you keep talking, we'll just live in the real world.
No, I agree. It's a pipe dream, like you said before. Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Gayton. Thank you, but no thank you. Anyway.
Keep flapping your lips. Somebody will buy your story.
Yeah, well, somebody will hear it. Nobody will buy it. Anyway, Jan, thank you. We'll talk about it next week. Maybe we have more news about us and Artie next week. Then we'll also know about the semi-finals or the quarterfinals coming up next week. Lots of rugby to talk about as well. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure and always fun.